Welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast, the show where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm your host, Mark Moore.
And I'm your other host, Josh Berkey.
And we will be covering Sleepaway Camp.
But before we get there, we are going to share, we have a special surprise for you guys on this episode. We're hoping that this is the first of many where we're able to kind of talk about a longer movie like Sleepaway Camp more in depth, and then to kind of give you guys spoiler-free reviews on new movies that are upcoming. And we actually get to talk about the-last-matinee, which is a Spanish film being released by Dark Sky Films and Bloody Disgusting. Mark, how would you what is the-last-matinee about?
Well, it falls in the slasher category, I think, is where I would
100%.
Yeah, and it's movie theater during, obviously, a matinee, as the name implies, and some fun / killing going on during the movie.
Yeah, that's basically the plot of it. And so I guess let's kind of get into just kind of our spoiler-free thoughts on this. I personally really had fun with this. I thought that I got to also sit down with the director, Maxi Consente, and you guys can hear that interview right after you guys get done with this, wherever you guys get your podcast from. Finish this episode and then go check out. But he compares like his influence for this movie to like a mixture of Jala films. I don't know how to pronounce the guy's name. And like American slashers. And I feel like you can like definitely like get that sense in here. Like it definitely has that like specifically, like, and I don't know about you, like, it specifically to me, it feels like it follows kind of like the aesthetic visually of a 90s like slasher boom that you would see taking place around like Scream, Halloween H2O, like the mid to late 90s, where the genre was kind of really starting to be revived because of Kevin Williamson. I think a lot of that takes place and kind of has that influence here. And it's also worth mentioning that this film is a time period piece. It's a period piece taking place in 93.
Yeah, it has that kind of very late 80s, early mid 90s kind of slasher. It felt more like a slumber party massacre than it did a Scream to me, though. Maybe it was just the style, but it does definitely kind of fit in that kind of category. If you like that style slasher, then it'll be one you end up liking.
So I really enjoyed the overall, like I really had fun with this film, and I liked the fact that they had a theater setting to where you got to kind of see the typical things that you see in theaters. Like you have your first date, you have basically friends coming, you have the kid that's clearly snuck into a movie that he wasn't supposed to be here. You have like all of these archetypes that you see in normal life, so it gives it kind of this like very realistic feel to it. But then also at the same time, I feel like a lot of it just kind of also feels very predictable and formulaic, and that kind of like looking at it through like the lens of like a critic, it definitely took away from like its potential for me. Like I called how it was going to end within probably the first 20 minutes of this movie, and I was right.
Yeah, it wasn't anything new. I enjoyed the movie for what it was. My only real issue was like with Jason. He's killing everybody at the camp that has sex. With Freddy, he's killing in his own dream world, all the different kids. They all have a motive, but the one thing I missed, and I don't know if I just missed it or it wasn't clear, was what was his reasoning?
See, to pull out from Scream, it's the new millennium. Like motives are kind of like uncool and like unfathomable at this motive. Like so like that for me, like it didn't the whole fact of like the motive, like it didn't really break character for me for this film. I feel like a large portion of my I feel like this film has a really strong legs for its like first two acts and then kind of falls apart in its third act. And the thing that mostly helps it fall apart is just the predictability. But the thing that helps and saves it is its gags, and also at the same time its visuals that come with said gags.
Yeah, it's by no means a bad film. It's that was the only thing that really bothered me. It's just I saw no purpose to him other than he's there. At least in Scream, they were following the rules of horror movies. There was some sort of, albeit loose, some sort of reason for what they were doing. You never really got that feel with the bad guy in Last Matinee, and that's the only thing that threw me off. But yeah, it was predictable, but that could also go back to things we've mentioned before on the podcast. That because we've watched way too many horror movies over the years and we just know all the stuff that goes on in them by now, or is it a point of the writing that it ends up being predictable?
I think with a lot of these films and these like newer directors and writers that are paying homage to what has come before it, they're like, oh, they don't make American slashers the way that they used to. And it's true. We don't see slashers in the same conventional space. So then you have movies like Lucky or Happy Death Day that are trying to reinvent that, but still pay homage to what has gone before it. And that is something that I think this film doesn't necessarily do. But it definitely follows that formula very closely, and it's a little bit irritating in some ways of how closely it follows it. I will say though, one of the things that I can praise this film for is its use of shadows and lighting. I really enjoyed the fact that you don't see the killer's face until the third act, but once you kind of have that reveal, it feels really anticlimactic. Like I was expecting a little bit more of a gut punch when they revealed it, and he's kind of creepy, but had they just kind of stuck with the aesthetic of shadows and kind of like these camera angles that hid his face where you only got to see his hands and POV, like I feel like the film definitely could have had in it a special intentional just really strong identity, but instead it chooses to kind of just be stylized like everything that's come before it.
So, without giving anything away, I expected him to be on topic with the movie that was playing in the background. That's what I expected, and it just turned out to not be.
So fun fact for you, and I learned this when I sat down with Maxie. The gentleman whose face is actually revealed, the actor that plays the slasher in this movie, is actually the director of the movie that is playing in the background.
That's a real movie?
That is a very real movie from 2011.
I wondered if it was or not, or if it was just made up for the Last Matinee. But that's actually what I was expecting. Is it tied to that other than what you just mentioned?
Well, you guys can hear my conversation with Maxie Contente, the director behind The Last Matinee, and you guys can check it out. It is going to be on video, on demand, DVD, and digital beginning August 28th. But Mark, what would you give this on a scale of 1 to 5 on our Rorschach rating scale, where does The Last Matinee land for you?
About a 3.
I'm also gonna go a 3. I think we summed it up perfectly. It's a fun time. It's just very formulaic, and
it's nothing special. It's just entertaining.
Yeah. So I feel like if you guys are fans of like 80s and those like 90s slasher films, this is right up your alley. Check it out and let us know what you guys think about it. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to be talking about Sleepaway Camp with Camp-Crystal-Latte. We'll be right back, guys.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Right, we welcome back to Abyss Gazing. We are now joined by John, I guess it's the CEO. I don't know really what your official title is, but he's like we said before the commercial break. He's from camp-crystal-latte, which is a horror-themed coffee company. What's going on, my dude?
Hey, what's up, guys? Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for being here, man. So how did you kind of get started with the idea of doing coffee like horror themed?
Man, it really, I've always been into coffee, and always been into horror. And I was just thinking, what could I do? Obviously with the horror and the horror community, I mean, there's a lot of really great artists, and just being a part of that, I was like, how can I kind of contribute and stay engaged on creating horror themed anything? And it was just coffee every time I came back to it. And then the name just kind of came into my head, and we just kind of ran with it,
Yeah, for sure. Now, like as of this recording, I haven't tried any of the coffee yet. And I'm planning on getting there.
We'll get some out your way.
I'm terribly sorry from the bottom of my heart for not being guys prepared.
My wife is the coffee drinker in the house. I drink tea, so you can call me bitch if you want. But
no, that's something we're working on as well. I'm not as well versed in the tea game as I am with coffee, but it's definitely something that we've had requested, and there's a lot of potential in the tea, the tea avenue.
Yeah, because I'm a tea snob and a half, so that would be awesome.
For sure.
So I guess like my because like out of marking on myself, like I'm definitely the coffee drinker. I live and die by coffee. My day is determined on whether or not it's going to be good or bad, depending on if I have coffee. So the fact that you guys have horror themes, it's something that I'm very much drawn to. And I love the fact that you guys have like blends that are named after like different characters. I think one of my favorites that you guys actually have is like the Texas Jammin', the Texas Java or whatever. It's like
the
Texas
Jitter
Chainsaw.
Juice.
Yeah, Jitter Juice, yeah.
Yeah, that one sadly we had to wave goodbye to very early on into its creation. So that was one of our favorites too, and the artist that worked on it, Puis Calzada, man, he does amazing work. So we were really bummed about that one, but plan is to definitely re-release that coffee with a different label.
But I'm curious if you can kind of talk about the process that you guys have as far as like kind of like choosing the blends and kind of like which characters or like slasher icons you guys are gonna name the blends after.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of it's weird, right? Because and this is probably going to sound weird, but I see it. You know, we drink a lot of coffee, and you know, for example, like the sweets to the sweet blend, you know, as soon as I saw, or it's a single origin, actually, it's a Nicaraguan. As soon as I saw and had that coffee, I was like, the honey notes in it immediately drew me to Candyman. You know what I mean? And, you know, for the Woodsboro blend, it's more of like a dark tobacco, like real thick caramel, you know, notes. And I just remember watching Scream and how much blood there was going on in that, especially like the first kill with Casey's boyfriend and things like that. And it just kind of comes into my head, you know, after when I have the coffees and we're working with new roast and blends and it really just, you know, just kind of comes to me a little bit, I guess.
So it's more of tasting it, seeing what the flavors are, and kind of connecting it to how you want to name it.
Yeah, that, and then also a lot of the like for the Jitter Juice, for example, that was an espresso blend, and it was when we tried it, it was strong. It was real strong. So I knew that I wanted, you know, I wanted to do a Texas Chainsaw Massacre coffee, and then the Jitter Juice is just kind of like I want to say it's like more of a Southern theme. So it just went perfect together.
Yeah, man, that sounds so amazing. Make me want so much coffee right now. But it's late and I have to work in the morning, so I'm like, but yeah, so I guess you know, my last question concerning like before we kind of get into Sleepaway Camp would be like, where can people pick up get all of their coffee needs and desires?
Yeah, so camp-crystal-latte.com. We're still in the very early stages. So we're pumping out coffee. So right now is a really good time to, you know, follow the Instagram at camp-crystal-latte. It's cool because, you know, that's how I found you guys and starting the business. So we're really connected with a lot of really good people, and most of our customers we DM all the time. So it's been a real fun time. But camp-crystal-latte.com and at camp-crystal-latte on Instagram.
All right. Well, you guys can also find links in the descriptions below. But we're going to talk about this movie, Sleepaway Camp. It is now streaming on Shudder and a multitude of other platforms. If you guys haven't seen it, my God. This movie is
okay. Real quick, had you seen this before, Josh?
This was the first time. I think I'm the only person on this call that had never seen this before. This has been on my list for years. Much like Ghoulies, and unlike Ghoulies at the same time. So much like Ghoulies, this was a first time watch for me. But unlike the Ghoulies episode, I did not watch all of the sequels for this in preparation for this one, mostly because I just didn't want to pay $3.99 per movie.
So at one point, Shudder had all of them, and I watched through like all of them in one night a couple months ago, and they progressively get worse. But they get worse in that campy, cheesy 80s horror way that you expect
Yeah.
that make them fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember talking to you, and when you told me about the movies, I asked if you seen it. I think you told me that was your first watch, and that's where I was like, yeah, this is gonna be a fun one.
So like even like right out the gate, like I think that like this is like really early in the slasher boom that we're seeing in the 80s, that it's taking place because of the success of films like Halloween and Friday the 13th. So now you have all of these smaller productions that are taking place, like Sleepaway, Summer Party Massacres, Sorority Massacre. I probably misspoke on that title. But you guys had all these like things that were just like pumping out like so much slasher content. And I gotta say, right from the get-go, this movie completely kind of diverts expectations that I feel like I wasn't prepared for. The way that the opening scene is kind of like this like exploration of like the camp, and then you have like all of these like voiceovers from like kids and teenagers that you believe are like campers at this camp, and then you find out that it's vacant. And that right away kind of told me that this was going to be a step up from a lot of the other slashers that were being made during this time.
Well, you had at this time period, Friday the 13th 1 and 2, and that whole franchise took place primarily at camps until some of the later installments. Then you had Sleepaway Camp, you had The Burning. There was another one I can't remember the name of. But you had a handful of these camp slashers come out very close with a similar premise, but not quite what this one turns out to be.
I think that the director writer, and I may be wrong on this, I think he actually went to that camp, and when he wrote the movie, he wrote it for that camp, which I believe I read that, and so he already had it planned out, one location, doing it at the camp that he already knows.
That's amazing.
That just makes it more awesome.
I feel like that's what happened. Fact checked. I didn't fact check it, but I believe I read that somewhere, that he already had it in his head where he wanted to do the movie.
I feel like, Mark, to your point though, like we specifically about Friday the 13th, like it always takes place at camp, but it's never to the extent that with Sleepaway Camp. You don't actually see, like, you see counselors, but you never see campers until part 6, and then you never see campers ever again. And that's one of the things that I feel like makes this such a standout within the genre, is because you have both of those mixtures of counselors and camps. But I did get to a point where I was like, these kids, like the kids like that we spend all the time with, like I'm looking at my notes, like Angela and Paul and all of these other like kids, like they seem like they're like 12. Like it's really hard for me to believe that they're like 15, 16, because they just don't like act like it or look like it. And like maybe
they actually use teenagers to play teenagers.
Well, I get that, but these kids look extremely young, and like I don't know, man, like being like 13, being like 11, 12, like I'm not thinking about like like having sex. Like I'm thinking about like, I don't know, like I'm still in that like awkward age, like where I'm like thinking about like what I'm gonna watch after like school, like what times Batman come on or Ninja Turtles. And I don't know, like it was like that, like whole like them trying to like push the sex agenda with these kids was just kind of really weird for me. But it makes the ending of this movie a little bit more tolerable and satisfying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that Ricky, Angela's cousin, 17 in that movie, and he doesn't look it at all. He looks younger than her, and I think she was 13 at the time.
So I can't remember the actor's name, but the only one other than Angela, because you can't forget Angela when you watch this movie.
No.
But the only other one I recognized was the kid that was in Manhattan Project with John Lithgow.
I've never seen that, so
I haven't either.
Oh my God. That's right. I'm the old fart of the group, aren't I? It was an 80s movie where a kid essentially builds an atomic bomb as a science project.
Oh yeah, I gotta check that out.
I mean, yeah, definitely like seems like something that would happen in the 80s. Those movies are super weird. Super weird. But speaking on Angela, like I don't want to get into like the twist of the movie so flippin' early, especially the fact that it's just all hanging out there. Well,
that's one way to put it.
Right, yeah.
I mean, so like, all right, so it's kind of like one of those things, like take a movie like Watchmen, where I guess we're just gonna get into it right now. Then, you take a movie like Watchmen, and like I remember sitting in the theater opening night for it, and the friend that I'd gone with, she was like, yeah, she's like, my boyfriend saw this at the midnight showing. There's blue penis everywhere, and I was like, what do you mean? And so like literally, for some reason, like once you see it, like it's just every frame, your eyes just instinctually go there. And so, like, for years, I had known that, like, the twist of the movie, that it was revealed that Angela was really a boy. And I was like, okay, well, how are they going to frame it? And then you have that iconic shot of her, well, him, at the end, just kind of, like, hovering above Paul's body. And it's just kind of all hanging out. And, like, the way that he is lit is it's like all his entire body is just dark with the exception of his crotch. And so
and
I'm just
creepy
like
face. That was the creepiest part of the whole movie.
Was the
face is legendary.
It was, yeah. But like I don't know, like for me, like I came away from this movie, especially like to go back to the time period that this was released. I think that this is a movie that was so ahead of its time in that regard. To kind of talk about, issues of transition and specifically like the gender in which you're comfortable in. I think this film, even though that agenda's kind of pushed on her,
that's what I was going to say.
Because pronouns matter.
They make it, when you pay attention, you find out that it was the aunt that Angela had gone to live with after the opening accidents had kind of pushed it. You're a girl. We don't need another boy here. Your name is Angela. And it was really pushed on Angela that she was that he was a girl, whatever. And it was more of the aunt's will than what Angela felt.
Yeah.
Yes.
R.I.P. Aunt Martha.
You're dealing with the fact that she had a head injury too at the beginning when all this was going on. So
okay, I guess I missed, like I guess I might have missed that, because like I was wondering why in that flashback like her head was wrapped, but now that you say that, like
she was part of the boating accident.
She was part of the boating accident.
And I don't think that she's really because she mentions it a couple times. It's like, don't let them know where you got the physical slips. And so I think that Aunt Martha in the movie thinks she's a doctor, but may not really be a doctor. Because she brings it up a couple of times. And then, that flashback and even the flashback in the kind of where I think it's Angela and where she gets the kiss on the beach. And then it goes to that cut of her dad and the other man in bed. And then it's kind of like her looking at herself, like pointing at herself, that was crazy to me. Like the second watch through, I was like, wow, because it didn't really make sense the first time. But the second time it was like, wow, this movie is way ahead of its time.
See, I took that scene particularly to like kind of like her processing like the traumatic events, that not only did she like witness her father die right right in front of them, but also too I would also say that like for that scene in particularly, it felt kind of like the trauma of also having like repressed sexuality, and like from someone that has I've talked about this, shared this in our first 2 episodes so far, so like I'm kind of like the weird one when it comes to horror, because like I am also a Christian. I'm also a believer. And so like, it's really weird because like when you talk to Christians about sex and particularly, it's like this like taboo topic that nobody wants to talk about. So for like all the years that I've been a Christian, like I definitely relate to that idea of repressed sexuality and kind of that journey that you have to go on in order to find out what works for you sexually, like who you're attracted to, and really also that gender identity that I feel like this film kind of hints at, but doesn't really explore to the extent that it does. And I think that scene in particular that you're talking about, John, I think that it is kind of like, because of Aunt Martha is like, oh, you're a boy, but we're going to make you a girl. I feel like they also have this repressed sexuality that they're trying to deconstruct because they feel like what they feel is wrong.
Well, the aunt even had a touch of androgyny. If you really looked at her character, the makeup, the hands and stuff, she really had kind of an androgynous feel to her, or at least to me and my wife when we watched it. So there was that as well. But one of the interesting things about the movie overall is when they showed some of the kills, it was very clearly man hands and man arms.
Yeah,
So,
especially the scene after, or when he goes in the cabin to kill Judy.
Yeah, and the shower slashing.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very clear, and it throws you off for the whole movie until you get to the end and they kind of make the big reveal, and it's like, oh, it makes sense now.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me when I kind of deep dived in the movie. I think the character that played Ricky was doing all the kills, because Felissa's mom was on set the whole time, and that was one of the stipulations that they came to, was they were okay with everything, the penis and everything, but having Felissa do the kills was a no-no for Felissa's mom, so it was all Ricky.
One of the thoughts I had was that was her introductory role into acting. How does that make you feel to know that your first role in acting is in a slasher and you're basically Mangela?
Mangela.
How would that affect your career later?
Well, I mean, she's gone on to make a hell of a name for herself. I mean, that, we talked about it originally, but the very last shot when the big reveal is being made is that it's that smile and it's that stance that is iconic. It's what you see and quite literally end the film. The credits fades to green, and then up comes all the cast and crew and everyone that worked on this movie. And so clearly, I mean, it had an impact, and I would kind of equate her status, at least in the horror realm, to kind of like this movie did for her what Halloween did for Jamie Lee Curtis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, my girlfriend and I met her here recently, and I think aside from just the iconic role, and then it kind of got its I think it was like 1999 2000, it came back around, and everyone, it became that cult following that it has. But I think other than just the movie, like her husband, Felissa Rose's husband, was that, like, that's how they met. He was a huge Sleepaway Camp fan, and just basically stalked her, and then they ended up getting married and having a family. So yeah, she talks about it all the time, that she's been in other movies, but this was the one that not only just the kind of stardom, but actually gave her like quite a life.
What else has she been in?
Victor Crowley, dude. Her killing Victor Crowley is awesome.
That may be one I'm not sure that I've seen.
Yeah, if you I recently just watched those, and I started with Victor Crowley because Felissa was in it, and it's a great kill. It's close to the Sleepaway Camp ending, but it's hard to top.
Yeah, that's yeah, that you don't forget that one.
Yeah, that's one that stays with you forever.
Can we kind of talk about, like, while we're like kind of like floating back around the idea of the sexual undertones that this movie has?
Yeah, my bad.
No, you're good, man. Like, you look at characters like Artie and Mel, and there's definitely some like Predator vibes that are going on. And when we talk about this movie being ahead of its time, it's it's definitely now, for many reasons, it's been overshadowed by A Nightmare on Elm Street that came out the same year. And the original concept for Freddy Krueger that would eventually be explored in the 2010 remake was that he was going to be a pedophile and a child killer. And they pulled out because they just didn't want to. They thought it was too controversial. And I'm curious, like, how did you guys kind of feel about like knowing that knowledge and kind of like how they handled characters, and like just didn't care about the controversy, they just embraced it?
Well, some of the best movies that have come out in general, not just horror, but in general, have been ones where writers and directors have just kind of said, screw it, we're going to do it anyways. And the controversy either leads to greatness or shunning. And in this case, it ended up being fantastic.
Yeah, and I'd have to agree too, because I think that I don't know how many more movies the writer-director did after this. I don't know if they did any, but I think that it was just one of those things where it's like, and it's hard to say because I wasn't even born yet, I don't think, when this movie came out. So it's hard to say kind of what the view on it was then when it released. But I think definitely the fact that he just kind of, I want to make a movie, I want it to be horror, and I want it to be at a camp, and then just kind of went with it, and it doesn't really seem like he gave it much thought, you know what I mean? And I think that's what kind of makes it all over the place like that. But yeah, definitely the Artie character was that was weird.
Oh, man, watching that, like, I knew that they were eventually going to go that way with his character, and the scene between him and Angela when they're in the closet together, or the pantry, whatever you want to call it, like, what just got real uncomfortable real quick. And then Ricky walks in, and you're like, oh, I guess this is going to end. And I love how they made him kind of like the first target, because he's a character that even prior to that scene which is just kind of like despicable, like really earned. And I won't say he's my favorite kill of the film, but he's definitely up there.
Your most appreciated?
Oh, my most appreciated is the shower one, man. My dude.
That one's pretty good too.
That shower,
Dude, yes.
shower scene, gnarly. And the fact that she stops to actually wash off the knife, brilliant.
Yeah. And I think the effects, man, the effects in that, like Artie burning, you know what I mean? Like with all the blisters and then like the shower scene, like watching the documentary, the guy that did the effects is like, if you watch the shower scene, there's very little blood on her body, because he's like, well, it would have washed off in the shower, so they just left that wax cut on her back. It's like, and then just going even further to like the walls of the showers in camps are so thin, so they really played off that, because he's like, nah, just send it right through that aluminum. And so it's like the effects in that movie and all the kills, I think, are super underrated, because they're just phenomenal.
Well, you had mentioned Freddy Krueger. They cut the whole pedophile storyline from the original and put it. He was apparently, and I'll have to look into it to get you the information, because I'm sure you're going to want to know, but apparently Freddy was actually based on a child killer.
Yeah, I've heard that too.
That.
Yeah,
I believe that.
Yeah, he was actually based on a real life pedophile and serial killer. It might have been Albert Fish, but I might be wrong.
Oof.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I've heard that before as well. I didn't hear the Albert Fish part, but that would make a lot of sense. That guy was evil.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm kind of the old school weirdo of the bunch, if you haven't picked that up yet. I know all the weird stuff like that. So
it's like we have to reestablish everything with every new episode, because like we've established things of like personality traits about ourselves to our listeners, but it's like our guests might not quite be there yet. So anyways, while we're sticking on the topic of gags that this film has, man, probably the most brutal. I don't know if you guys feel the same way, but the bee sting poop combo.
Oh yeah, dude.
Yeah.
No, gnarly.
That's the most vulnerable you could ever be in a horror movie is pooping. So I feel like they played that up perfectly. Because what are you gonna do?
Yes. Yeah, I had vibes back to that scene from Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning. It's just like it's one of like the most like ridiculous like kills that the entire franchise sees, but I feel like that one's just kind of lame, because it's just like, oh, I'm just gonna stab you through this thing, this porta potty. And with this one, I mean, like, it's like, no, I'm gonna shake up this beehive and then I'm gonna drop it in you when you're, like you said, like really vulnerable. And it's just like, that scene was really hard for me to watch, because I'm just like imagining like somebody doing that. So I'm like, all right, anytime I go camping, never piss anybody off.
Yeah.
But at least Dude Man was in the right spot, because I'm pretty sure first he said it, then he did it. And I mean, it was all downhill from there.
Yeah. But I mean, like, also you have to like take into accountability, like, I mean, what if that guy was allergic to bees? Like, not only are you getting, like, you're dying by the very thing that you're allergic to, but it's slow, painful torture.
Yeah, and do you wipe in that situation? Or do you just hope that you've had a good diet up to that point and just make a run for it? Because that, like I said, man, that's like the top 5 worst fears.
I mean, my mom always told me to carry a clean pair of underwear just in case there was an accident. So.
Did she tell you after watching Sleepaway Camp?
No. I wasn't technically allowed to watch horror movies when I was growing up, so.
Same, man.
Keyword being technically.
Oh, no, the horror is still something new to me. That's the reason why Sleepaway Camp and every movie that we've done so far for the podcast has been a first time watch for me. Ghoulies, Wicker Man, and Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah, if you haven't seen the original Wicker Man, it's a treat.
It's bizarre.
I need to catch that one. I haven't seen that one. The last ones that I watched recently, like I said, with the Hatchet series, I didn't want to give it a chance, and then when I did, it was like, oh no, I got to watch all these now.
Hatchet's good.
I've seen them. I've come across them a few times, but I haven't watched them yet.
Yeah, definitely worth a watch. But yeah, the poop and bees, man, that's up there. And then what was it? The curling iron on Judy. That was brutal too.
Yeah, that was pretty kind of vicious.
Yeah,
Pretty.
they started getting crazy toward the end there.
But that's what I think really like sets this film apart and like really demonstrates how ahead of its time it was to just kind of like bring that point back up, is that it's being done in an era where everything just feels so like cut and dry copy and paste from like other films, where it's like, okay, like I can't get creative with my gags, so I'm just going to stick with machetes, I'm just going to stick with my knives, I'm just going to stick with my really sharp things. And this one really uses the camp to its advantage. Like it makes going to camp really, really terrifying. It does to camp what Jaws did to water.
Yes.
Well, I think that's part of what makes it such a fantastic movie in the long run, is it didn't copy what had been done before. It may have fallen into that summer camp horror, but it didn't follow the same rules that those did. It kind of did its own thing.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, I agree there too, because I feel like it also goes back to the, was it Robert Hilsick? Like if I remember right, he was just a student at the time, and he just kind of went for it. And I think it goes back to that, because I think probably that early on he probably didn't know how to copy that well if he tried, So he was just really just freestyling a lot.
No, if he did freestyling, he did a good job at it.
Yeah.
But also there's a lot of weird things in the movie, like the lack of the balance of male nudity versus there's no female nudity, I don't think, in the movie at all. Tons of male nudity.
It's hinted at and implied, but there's a lot of man ass in that movie.
There's a bunch of that, dude, and I think it's all at one time. He puts them all in the lake naked at one time, which is like, no, there's no telling what he was thinking at the time of that.
I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I was gonna say, like, that really at the time, like to your point, like really flips the genre on its head, because like you're, especially in a time where you're expecting to have something like female nudity. I have a couple friends that like we just get together every so often and we just watch 80s movies, and a portion of it is like we've just kind of come to expect, like, if you're watching an 80s sci-fi or horror movie, especially if they're straight to video, you can expect to see one pair of tits. Like it just seems like a rite of passage for the genre. As strange and as bizarre as it is, but this film, the fact that there is no female nudity and it focuses on male nudity, like it's a good thing to worth noting that like I didn't pick up on it until you said something, but it really does flip the genre on its head, especially considering the fact that like up till like I want to even say like a couple years ago, like if you had full frontal male nudity, they actually wouldn't, the MPAA like would automatically give your film an NC-17 rating.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, like female nudity was fine, but male genitalia for whatever reason was an NC-17 film.
Yeah, and I think this one may have been because like I said, I wasn't even born then, but just I know that when this film went to ratings, they were like really close to the X, because of all the butts, the man butts, and stuff like that. So when they got the R, they were like perfect, because that was I think they were really close too on Sleepaway Camp to not getting the R rating for all the male nudity. And even now, man, I can't even think of like 5 films that up to current date that do that.
Yeah, it really did stand out for that. I mean, that's one of the things that made it different. I mean, we're part of a group, a horror movie club out of Winchester, Virginia, that they joke about the 3 B's of horror movies: blood, bad decisions, and boobs. And that was like the mainstay of 80s horror.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so before we kind of get into talking about the mental health stuff, because this film unpacks so much. Was anybody bothered by the fact that like, and I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of reading into this movie a little bit because I have a tendency to do that, but like Mel, for some reason he reminded me of the mayor from Jaws, but also he felt like it was his like sole God-given like purpose in life to bring the camp killer to justice, and I just didn't understand that.
Yeah, that definitely, and I think the Meg kill is what set him over the edge. But yeah, it's crazy how he kind of escalates to that point, because if you're like with the chef gets killed, he's like, yeah, we need to keep this on the down low.
Here's a bribe, stay quiet.
Yeah. I think what was it, like $25? Like you didn't see anything.
And then it was $15.
Yeah. And then it gets to I think the canoe kill is kind of where he starts to get a little worried, but he's still not really overly concerned. You know what I mean? He's like, I got to call this kid's parents, and I think he even tells the cop, he's like, you don't know until you know, so just do your investigation and don't assume anything. And then I think it's the Meg kill where he's like, he really loses it,
I kind of took his attitude towards the whole thing is he didn't want to send the kids home because then he'd have to refund the money and he might lose the camp. And that's the way I took the whole thing. Even when he's talking to the cop, he's like, oh, keep this quiet. You don't have to tell anybody. So
like I said, Jaws.
Yeah, right. Right, dead on, dude.
Yeah, in a lot of those movies, though, that was kind of typical. Whoever was in charge was trying to kind of keep everything as quiet as possible so they could keep doing whatever they were doing.
Yeah, keep making money.
Yeah, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know. Like, it's really weird because, like, Ricky just happens to be, like, the first person he sees, and so he's just like, you're a boy? The killer's a boy? It must clearly be you right in front of me. And he just goes Chuck Norris on this kid. Yeah. And, like, almost, like, beats him to the point of death. And I'm just like, what was the purpose of that? Like, do you feel better now?
Oh, yeah, and the way that he does it, too, he's just, like, full-blown, like, just double fists, like, no, just wailing to, like, going nuts.
Oh, it's so crazy. But this film unpacks so much with his characters. Like we talked about so far in this episode, like, obviously, Felicia's her character's journey throughout the course of this is she unpacks a lot of trauma and a lot of also fear, it seems like, because of this accident very early on. And kind of I feel like almost kind of too being like having that flashback scene, like being a boy by birth and then kind of being told by your now caretaker, your aunt, that you can't be what you are kind of almost gives them a sense of, I'm not good enough the way that I am. And so you also have that toxic family life where it seems like before Aunt Martha steps in that he has a good life. It seems like he has a really great relationship with his father. And I don't know, like for me, like it really broke my heart kind of watching this character go and seeing their relationship with Paul and seeing that he was the first character that really got her to speak, didn't bully them, and then turns around at the turns around later and then he kind of like reveals that like he's got this like hidden agenda that he basically wants to get laid like every other kid at camp. And again, I think that here you have a character that for the second time that they have let somebody in, now they have been told once again that they're not good enough just being who they are to this person unless they are giving something in return.
Well, Angela comes across, depending on how you view it, as almost an abuse victim up until in the movie.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and so much of her life, and I think that so much of what she's going through as a character is that abuse has kind of led her to that fact of, I'm not good enough. And I specifically bring that up because one of the things that specifically about her character, though, is that, she is an abusive survivor. Like, Mark, you're absolutely right. Like, she is a victim of a toxic family life. And specifically, I say that because the reason that I got into doing mental health advocacy work and started up doing a what victims and villains is today is because I had a friend that went through something very similarly, and instead of lashing out to others, he lashed out and he took his own life. And I kind of like, in the fallout of kind of understanding and processing his death, it was I learned a little bit more about his home life. And so here you have a man that basically was told that he was never good enough the way that he was. And I think, and I argue that that's what we see experience with Angela. Even the people that communicate and talk to her throughout the course of the movie prior to Paul bully her for being quiet. And so, like, if you're not like everyone else, then you're clearly not good enough.
Yeah, and I agree, man. I think it starts, especially too, where Aunt Martha literally tells her, we already have a boy, so you can't be that, you have to be what what I need, and I need a girl. And then, yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think the whole film is just her trying to, and then going back to, because you see her with her head wrapped, so you don't know what the head injury is. But I can only imagine going straight from a head injury into, Aunt Martha saying, this is what you got to be because I already got one of those, and then just, sending her to camp around all these kids who obviously are very comfortable with their sexuality because they're all trying to get laid and they know what they want. And then you have Angela, you know what I mean? She doesn't really know what she wants or what she is. And I think especially when you're at that age and you you're more reliant on your family, the world seems a lot smaller, you know what I mean? So it's kind of hard to look outside of that globe, that snow globe of a world you live in, especially at that age, to know that there's more going on out there than just what's happening right here, right now. So, but yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head.
And a part of the issue with the relationships that you develop and hearing that so early on is that cognitively, you start to believe those. So I think that we see that with Paul, like to where she's very timid around Paul, that here you have a guy that's actually nice to Angela and she's not exactly sure how to take it. And so there's this hesitancy to really let him in. And once you do let him in, then you find out that, oh no, he just wants to use me, like so many other people in my life have wanted to use me for their own gains. And also to to go back to the idea of not being good enough and kind of being told that, like, you're not good enough the way that you are, so I need you to be this. You really start, if you hear that enough, your brain actually starts to believe that. And so now you're not only being surrounded in an environment of toxicity, but you're believing the toxicity and taking it as normal.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I believe it. And I feel like, and I've seen this movie so many times, that at the end, because she's the one that says, take your clothes off, so it almost feels like she's wanting to let him in and just kind of reveal, what she's been going through. And then of course, how it plays out. But it feels like, she definitely has a connection. 'Cause I think most of her lines are to him. Because she's throughout the film, she's got very little dialogue other than just that stare,
Yeah, the stare pretty much was her main line. The whole movie. But no, I took it more as her setting him up, knowing what she was going to do once they got down to the beach. I took it more as a setup than anything else.
I mean, I kind of feel like it was kind of the last bit of evolution for them, to where they are kind of going through this journey. And I think that, and I'm going to place a disclaimer here as a straight cis male gender, that I can't speak to the pains of transitioning. I have tons of friends that have gone through transitions, that have shared their mental health journey with me, and kind of once they reach the end to that journey, they kind of talk about how liberating it feels, and just how correct they feel finally, and just at peace. And I feel like specifically with killing Paul, Angela, who has kind of been going through arguably sexual confusion throughout the entire course of the film, and really since she's been under Aunt Martha's roof, I would argue that them are finally complete in how they are comfortable in their own sexuality. Like it kind of feels like they're on the other side of that transition, is that they are no longer the boy that they were born into. They were no longer the girl that they were told to be, but they are now liberated to be this kind of just crazed, psycho killer, but is also finally comfortable enough in their own sexuality just to be open the way that everyone else in the camp is.
Well, in the later movies, it's still Angela, but they don't play up to the fact of who Angela really is. She's just a killer camp counselor in the other two movies.
It's true.
They don't play to the final reveal of Sleepaway Camp. Supposedly, they have recently released a true sequel to the original, but I haven't been able to find it. So,
there's a lot of open questions at the end of that movie, and I love looking at like the theories too of did Ricky know the whole time, like, which that's my favorite one, that he knows what's going on, You know, and you know, there's so many different theories out there on the film, but yeah, I think like we said before, it was definitely ahead of its time because this movie is, I think for now, is so relatable. You know, like you said before, with people going through transitions and self-identity and stuff like that, you know, today it makes a lot more sense than back in the 80s when it was released, you know.
I think that it was still happening in the 80s, that just because of a lot of, and again, another great documentary that Shudder released within the last couple of years was Scream Queen. And it is kind of telling the story of kind of like how Nightmare 2 turned from, backlashed, shunned entry into the franchise into this cult classic, and kind of it looks at what was happening culturally speaking. And I think that in 84 we were talking about sex, but it was always straight sex. Mm-hmm. It was never it was never transitioning. We weren't talking about gender identity. We weren't talking about anything really with the LGBT community, simply because like the AIDS epidemic, and we were really just kind of scared to talk about this. And this film really does leave a lot of those things open-ended. To your point, I think that John did know the entire time, and I think that he's kind of like not only family, but he's an ally for wanting to be with her, and to kind of like really stand up and let her know that hey, it's gonna be okay, like you have me in your corner. And I feel like that's something that whatever community you belong to, whether you are gay, straight, non-binary, transitioning, everybody needs somebody like Ricky in your corner that is going to go to bat and defend you. Because at the end of the day, like that one person can be really what prevents you and holds you back from just kind of being an ordinary, everyday, depressed person, to actually staying with us one more day and not choosing suicide.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you 100% there.
So where did you find that theory? I had never heard that one before. Just like I recently heard that Daniel LaRusso was the bad guy Karate Kid. It's a new theory. It's a new theory I just heard about a movie. Kind of like my favorite is that Kevin McAllister is really Jigsaw in the Saw movies.
Bro, that's fact.
Makes sense.
My other favorite one is Dyson from Terminator 2, faked his death and became Henry in Eureka.
Yeah, I heard it. There was a documentary, I think it's on YouTube, of the original Sleepaway Camp, and that was actually thrown out by the guy that played Ricky. He's like, he believes that he knows the whole time. And there were more thrown out, but that one for me was definitely the most believable. I think another one was that the female kid in the beginning, so the brother and sister, they both live and they're both doing the killings, which is a little less believable. But the Ricky one for sure is one that had me intrigued, because it was like, how, kind of in my head, how would he not know? Because there's so many years that go by, since the boat accident to the camp. And but like I said, that's one of those things that's kind of left open. They never really show Angela getting there. They just show Angela and Aunt Martha.
And I think in the time period that this came out, like today, everybody picks apart movies for their plot holes and things that aren't quite right in the story. Or when this came out back in the day, that wasn't nearly as prevalent to deal with from a crowd as it is now.
Yeah, especially horror genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. yeah. I mean, that's why you guys have me. I'm the analytical one. Remember, Mark?
Oh yeah, I just wing it.
Well, all right. One more time, you guys can stream Sleepaway Camp if you guys want to revisit it. If this conversation has jogged your memory and you're like, man, I want to visit this early 80s classic. It's now streaming on Shudder, along with a whole slew of other great films. And while you check out this movie, you should also drink coffee. One more time, John, where can people find Camp Crystal Latte online?
Yeah, dude, www.camp-crystal-latte.com, and we're real active on Instagram, so at Camp Crystal Latte. We love engagement and just meeting everybody and getting you guys coffee, so hit us up.
All right, Mark, where can people find you and all of their paint needs?
It's funny you mentioned that. I'm actually sitting here working on a commission now while we're talking. Yeah, I'm on Instagram as Titanium Juggernaut Painting.
You guys can find me and follow my film journey throughout all of eternity. I'm on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia. You guys can also follow our parent company on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You guys can go to victimsandvillains.net where you guys can get links to all of those support us on Patreon/Ko-fi and Ko-fi. You guys can also find more podcasts like this, movie reviews, and most importantly, our mental health resource library. We are going to leave you guys this week with Then It Ends. This song is called Endure. If you guys like what you guys hear, click the links in the descriptions below and check out all of their social media and follow them, and on all of wherever you guys get your music from. We're going to be back next time talking about The Stylist. Have a good one, guys.
I want you until the end.